formal council committee, the public proceedings will take place live on the internet. The meeting will be recorded for future viewing. It will assist the conduct of business if our participants speak only when invited. Members of the public are welcome to view the proceedings but should not make contributions at this meeting. All members of the committee have received the report in advance and had the opportunity to read them. The reports are published on the internet. All participants should mute their microphones and video feeds when they are not speaking. Anyone wishing to speak should indicate using the raise your hand button on the Microsoft Teams. Please remember to unmute your microphone and switch on your video feed when it is your turn to speak. Speak clearly and slowly into the microphone. If you do not have a hand button, please type your request to speak in the chat function. May I ask everybody's patience with the use of the technology? I apologise in advance if we experience any foreseen difficulties, which we shall try to resolve as soon as possible. Thank you. And the first item of business, any apologies?
We haven't received any, Chair.
Right, thank you. To report the appointments of any substitutes, in which case I assume we haven't.
None, Chair.
No, jolly good. Any declarations of interest under the Members' Code of Conduct? Nope. And to confirm and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of January. And if they're okay, if everybody's happy with those, right?
Yeah.
Jolly good. And item 6, update on the annual Centres Health Check Survey. And who's presenting this report?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's Paul Makeford.
Jolly good.
Thank you. I don't intend to go into too much detail in terms of an overview of the report. I'm sure members have read it, but I think in terms of a brief overview, the report seeks to provide an overview of the work undertaken on an annual basis within Regeneration Enterprise to monitor the vacancy rates of retail units within the borough's strategic centres, town centres, district and local centres, forming part of the Local Planning Authority's monitoring report. The survey assesses the levels of retail and other uses within each centre together with the vacancy rate. And whilst mixed use are promoted in local centres, the importance of local retail provision is also recognised. I think it should be noted that the survey entails an officer physically visiting each centre to record the information on a given day and is therefore a snapshot in time, with the majority of this year's survey being undertaken in August 2020. In terms of the sort of specific figures that are within the report, I think as an overview, the figures show that the majority of vacancy rates across the borough have remained relatively stable and are on par with national averages for high streets and shopping centres. I think the report also details the huge amount of work that's been undertaken to support retail businesses as part of the COVID-19 response, both in terms of supporting businesses to access grants, as well as supporting the safe reopening of our high streets and local centres. I think what we can't hide away from as well is the way in which our town centres and high streets are undergoing significant structural change, both in the way that communities access services and what this means for the future role of town centres and high streets. And I think this was apparent in the recommendations of the People's Panel when it looked at the top 3 priorities for Dudley and Brierley Hill town centres, where the focus was on community participation within our town centres, places for people to meet and relax, and ensuring that the town centres are safe places to visit. And I think it's these elements that we'll be building on as part of the Dudley Towns Fund Future High Street Fund applications for Brierley Hill and Dudley, as well as working with our other centres across the borough. I'll thank you, Chair, and obviously take any questions from members.
No problem. Yeah, if there are obviously any members you want to indicate, yes, I believe we got. Let's have a look. Actually, have you got
Yes.
access to the running order of the?
Yes,
yeah. Okay,
Councillor Barnett,
Okay.
Councillor Millward, then Councillor Sahota,
Okay.
and Councillor Foster.
Right. So who was first? Sorry, it was Councillor.
So Councillor Barnett.
Councillor Barnett. Yep. Yep. Okay. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. In good Tim Crompton style, I wasn't going to speak on this, but as I was looking at it, it's really about the future of town centres and high streets, and it's just a general question, really. it's very clear that you know, for all of us, our town centres have changed and continue to change, and there are all sorts of things that have impacted upon them, you know, over the last couple of decades. And while quite often, you know, you might hear from retailers and others this sort of idea of, well, you know, if we did this thing, then things would get back to how they were. And but it's becoming very apparent that things are never going to get back to how they were. And COVID-19 in particular, you know, whatever normal is after all of this is not going to be whatever normal was before. And I do wonder, I felt for a long time, for instance, that in order to regenerate our high streets, part of it might include allowing more conversion to residential for you know, business premises that are just, you know, never going to get let, because it might help the, you know, the owners to improve them, because you know, they started to get dilapidated, and all sorts of, you know, bad things start to happen when they're left for a long time. And I suppose, I mean, Paul, you might be able to answer. You know, is there some kind of review that maybe Dudley can do of the local centres? Do we have a local centres plan for planning, and are we thinking about allowing more residential and having a greater mix? I think that's saying it. I'll leave it there. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Paul, if you want to respond.
Yeah, I think in response to that, Councillor Barnett, yeah, I mean, I think there's been changes in terms of planning legislation. So there's what they call permitted development rights now, which now enable sort of retail units to be easily converted into residential uses. And I think that's certainly some of the focus that we're looking at in the St Thomas Quarter area of Dudley, for instance, is how we can start to shrink that retail core and bring a lot more residential use into the town centres, for the very point you made about increasing that footfall into our town centres and making them places to not just shop, but also to live and you know, spend time with friends and family. So that's certainly a part of our and part of the wider strategy we've got across the borough.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. Is Councillor Sahota next?
Good morning, good evening, Chair. And Paul, just a general question really on the report. And I think, like I said, I think like rest of the members, we welcome the report in terms of it gives a snapshot on how our district and strategic centres are doing. And I think obviously looking at the figures, we have been able to sort of keep figures sort of steady in terms of the vacancy rate. I know Housing Town Centres actually had some good press in terms of its sort of vibrancy, which is positive. But I think the key information missing in this report is in the report itself, it does, under purpose and under recommendations, it does refer to local centres, but there isn't any information in this report to see how the 15 local centres are doing, because those are the centres, in a sense, you know, all members have these centres in their wards. And I think it'd be good to see how the present situation is affecting the local centres in our neighbourhoods. And you know, that's the key information missing. You know, I think like the rest of the members, we're all fully aware of the changing environment that is happening, structural changes, etc. But I think it's important to keep an eye on local centres, and because they do provide that economic role, but also they provide a lot of community cohesion role. People, you know, some people can't go far to do the shopping, and they do the shopping in the local centres, and it gives also places where people sort of come and socialise. So I think it's important to actually have a bit more information on the local centres, and then maybe analyse which local centres are suffering more than others, and where we need to get the interventions in place. Obviously, I don't need to go through, you know, what we're doing within our ward, but there are certain local centres that do need a bit of TLC, and some centres actually have continued to sort of trade, not because, you know, because it's the entrepreneurial skill of the local traders. And I think we need, as a duty care, and also to ensure we adhere to the borough strategy and also national policy framework. So we need to see whether we do need to sort of have some intervention to protect these centres, because a good barometer of any area is what state of the local shopping centre is. If you've got a lot of shops boarded up, etc., then you know that area is in decline. And I think as a council and members, we need to make sure where centres are struggling, they do need a bit of TLC from the council. We need to then identify the funds to sort of support those centres, and where people, you know, to protect their jobs, but also to provide services in the community for those the local wards. Thank you.
Do you want to respond? Oh, yeah.
Just quickly to come back on that, Chair. I think the annual survey, which there was a link, actually, it obviously does go down to local centres and district centre level. I think I take your point. As part of the report, I was just really trying to pull out sort of a snapshot without going into the detail of each local centre, but that is noted, Councillor Soto. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. My question really was about the level of detail in the report. I mean, the report is welcome. I think it's helpful to be getting a report on how our high streets are doing and our towns are doing in terms of occupancy rates. But what I would probably like to see is detail of action plans to address where the issues are quite significant. And also, as well, sometimes the business development and the you know, attracting business attraction doesn't always follow generation of an area. And if I can give you an example of in my own ward, Pensnet High Street, you know, multi-million-pound project there to improve the road, to improve the road network there, to improve the flow of traffic from the motorway M5 junction 2 through to the Pensnet trading estate, for example. And there's a huge car park, you know, large car park has been built up there as well. You know, we've, you know, there is, and landscaping's been done. The whole area, High Oak, looks a lot better than it did. But what we haven't got there is our shops. We haven't had the retail hasn't been attracted to settle there. We've just got empty shops. What was a post office, fairly sized supermarket? We just haven't got them. So how do we, you know, we do this, we undertake this regeneration with the best intentions, but then we fail to be able to attract the business that infrastructure has been invested in for. So, you know, perhaps you could give me, Paul, some idea of what working, you know, to address that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've got within the sort of planning documents, we've got obviously various sort of growth corridors that we're working on as part of the, not just the existing core strategy, but the Black Country Plan review. And I guess part of that is that hierarchy of our town centres, and, you know, understanding where that new investment is going. But I'll take your point on that, Councillor Foster. So
if I can come back through you, Chair. So what is the plan for those type of areas? And I'm sorry to be parochial, but I'm very interested, obviously, in Pensnet, and the fact that a lot of investment has happened there at High Oak, and it's looking great. We just don't have the retail there or the businesses.
Well, I mean, there's obviously within Pensnet, there's a huge amount of investment gone into the DY5 enterprise zone at the Pensnet trading estate. And there's been some sort of new retail development that's gone on down the bottom end, heading into sort of into Kings Winford. But yeah, in terms of, I mean, I guess it's understanding, it's working with you as members, isn't it, as part of that community forum, and having that dialogue in terms of that wider investment and what your aspirations are for the area.
Yeah, well, you know, perhaps offline we can have a discussion about that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Tyler.
Sorry, Chair, I think we've missed Councillor Millwood out.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's all right. I'm running across the screen and back again. Sorry.
Right.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, Councillor Millwood. Sorry.
Thanks, Chair. There's a number of points that I want to bring up. One was following on from Councillor Barnett's comments, and I personally think that nationally we've got a God-given opportunity to look at the regeneration of our high streets with the conversion into living accommodation, which obviously will ease the growing pressure on our green belts. And I cite my eldest son, who lives in the middle of Stavanger in Norway, but prior to that lived in the slap bang in the middle of Aberdeen city centre, and then before that in the middle of Plymouth city centre. Doesn't need a car, everything there, because there's a lot of people living in the city and town centres. It means that the businesses are regenerated because people need the shops, they need the nightlife economy. And Dudley is a massive, for example, top church to bottom church. There's such a lot that can be done, and I do think that Dudley could lead the way with this nationally. We know that people are working from home, as I said earlier before the meeting started. The genie's out the bottle now. It's going to be very difficult to put back in. And we've got, as I said, a God-given opportunity to really push this agenda. My question is on page 3, Paul, because about the financial implications, because it says in point 11 that the cost to the council on all non-domestic properties was 3 million because of the unoccupied rate relief. But then on point 13, it says that businesses have to pay full rates. So am I missing something here? And what really is the true cost? That was my first question. With regards to what Councillor Sahota said, Gornal is one of the most thriving centres, I think, in the borough. Apart from Merry Hill, there's not a single shop empty. One of the barbers who opened up 3 years ago said he's got 4 shops, said it's the busiest high street he's ever been on. Yes, we've got COVID at the moment, there's a couple of shops closed, but it is a really, really thriving little centre. We're going to be seeing the building of a large supermarket, hopefully, providing a new pharmacy, parking spaces, public toilets in the not too distant future. So, you know, I keep an eye on my community. We've got some good community groups who feed into those businesses, and we feed back as well. And also, I mean, I don't want to act like the chair, but going on to what Councillor Foster said, I do believe that some of those shops closed down, Judy, when the roadworks were being carried out, and they've not reopened. And that's an issue we need to look at, that when we carry out major investment, that when shops are, you know, sadly, people can't get to them, we need to support those businesses that will suffer because of the improvement in the infrastructure. So that's just my point, Chair. Thank you.
That's no problem. Did you want to respond to that, Paul?
I mean, I think in terms of the financial implications to the council, I think business rates is complicated. I'm aware Ian's on the call. He may wish to come in at some point, but in effect, I think the council, I think what's noted in paragraph 11, it ring fences an amount in terms of what the likely liability is for a year. So on the basis that we project an amount or a loss in terms of income, in terms of that bottom line, if it doesn't go over and above that, then in theory we're already programming that into our financial forecast for the year. So in that essence, we're sort of projecting to make that loss. I think the other point on point 13 is that the business rates, they get an initial 3-month exemption when a property becomes vacant, but after that time, they then have to start paying business rates. I note Ian has got his hand up, so if Ian wishes to come in on that point.
Yep, Ian, if you want to answer the technical bits.
Sorry, I was doing the usual thing of trying to do other work while being on the committee because I'm on for the next item. But if I caught the question rightly, I think perhaps the issue of confusion might be that paragraphs 11 to 14 are talking about one thing, and paragraph 15 is talking about something completely different. So paragraph 11 to 14 are talking about the relief for unoccupied properties, and that is a cost to the council. And when more properties are occupied, that cost is less, and when fewer properties are occupied, it gets worse. Paragraph 15 is just talking about the unusual circumstances of the current year and the COVID-19 pandemic, where occupied retail properties get 100% relief. That is a one year own, as we've learned today from the comprehensive spending review. That is definitely a 1 year and 1 year only thing.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. Councillor Tyler?
Thanks, Chair. The trouble is coming in about 6 in the speakers. Most of the stuff you were going to talk about is already gone. But I do agree with Dan. Anne Millwood said exactly the same at our Scrutiny committee last week. And that's all been agreed. Can you hear me? Can I have a thumbs up, Paul? Manford, can you hear me?
Yeah, it's just it was buffering a bit. I think it might be my connection. Apologies.
Okay. Yeah. But really, just to reiterate, Dudley Town Centre is a classic example. If you don't have people living above the shops, you will never ever have a nighttime economy. You'll never have a thriving town centre unless you get people living in a town. I mean, you look up in Dudley and you see pigeon roosts and broken windows, and it's such a shame because it's. And what we've got to do now, post-COVID, we've got to change the way when it comes to getting these people back into town centres. And we might need to change the rules a little bit. But the important issue that I've made with the was the Federation of Small Businesses caters for small businesses. The Chamber of Commerce caters for mainly the larger businesses. But there's a great swathe of businesses in the middle. There is no organisation that looks after them. Now, post-COVID, these businesses will need a pair of arms wrapped around them, and they need some comfort.
Dave, you're getting slower and slower.
And that's where the council can come in. And that's what I suggested at the cabinet the other night, and that was agreed on motions. So I'm talking fast. It's just the kitchen. I'll leave it there then. Okay. All right. I'll leave it there, Chair.
Right. Okay. Did you want to respond to that, Paul?
I struggled to get some out. I think there was the. I think I'm in agreement, Councillor Tyler, that one of the key elements for the regeneration, certainly for Dudley Town Centre, is how we get a lot more residential usage back into, and specifically around the St Thomas Quarter, and that's one of the things that we are working with, and we're actively working with a couple of developers who have got interest in that half of the town centre to try and drive forward that change and that increase of residential development, so that footfall does come into the town centre, and we also start to create more of a nighttime economy for Dudley as well. So I'll take your points on board there. And I think the other element was around support for local businesses, which I think we are actively now building up a team to do that. And you'll have seen that we've got the virtual Christmas online store where we're trying to support local businesses to get their products and services online as part of that sort of channel shift and support around the COVID-19 response as well.
Okay. Did you want to clarify anything on that, Matt Williams?
Thanks, Chair. It's just an opinion, really. I mean, I take on board everything that's been said this morning, but I think you've almost got a holy trinity here, where you've got community, you've got regeneration, and you've got public realm. So it's not just about accommodation as such; it's how all that links together. And I suppose community safety comes into that as well, because people, they want to live in a safe environment. They want open space. They want to feel safe where they are. They want a community built around them and not live in isolation, and they want appropriate accommodation that is well served with public transport and everything else. So I think from Dudley, we do need to shift things slightly, because for sure our town centres are never going to be the same again. The need for office space, that's going to diminish with more people working from home. So we've almost got to get ahead of the curve. But I really do think that if we can create great places to live in a very holistic sort of way, and ask the community right up front what they want from us, then we can work it back and create something really special.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right. Okay. Councillor Crompton, I think, was next. Yep.
Sorry, Chair. I just had I just got cut off for a few seconds. You got me back in somehow. When I first looked at this scrutiny report, I've got to say I struggled. First of all, as to why it was on this committee's agenda, but also as to what we were going to be scrutinising. But bear with me a second. I did look at the bottom of the report where there's some documents there, and I've looked at the Borough Centre's review, where there's a lot of detail in there, I've got to admit, but there's no narrative in it. So it doesn't mean anything to me when I go through it. I think it does back up Councillor Millward's statement that Sedgley is doing very well, because it shows that there's no vacant frontage properties in the Sedgley town centre. But I just wonder, we're having this item on the agenda tonight, but I wonder where it goes after that. And I just leave that in the air for the committee to think about how we might want to bring this back to this committee, or we may want to make some recommendations to the Place Committee. It may very well have come here because the Place Committee is overloaded, but I don't know. So that's the first part of it. The second part is we could do with an audit of our properties, really. I understand there's a lot of information in that Borough Centre's review, but it would be useful, perhaps, to get some idea of what's the driving force within the town centre. What are the businesses that are thriving at the moment? What are the ones that are just limping forward? And then being able to set. You talked about what support we can give to them, and we've got the sort of lifeline at the moment of the COVID support, which is more than useful for an awful lot of businesses. I work for HMRC, so I know about the other side of that, but I wonder if we could do some sort of audit and then focus in on particular types of business that we got in there. It might be useful for us, and as a committee, I think it would be useful for us to know where we're going on that. We've talked about the impact of home working and the potential use, therefore, of many of the properties that we currently have. The small businesses, a lot like we've done in Dudley Town Centre in the back of the council house, where a lot of little small businesses, including ourselves, I suppose we're a large business, but we were using small properties, and those have now been let out. And we've got a community building up in there. And I think the point was raised by Matt, just that it's not just about having housing, it's then about having the infrastructure around it that people want to live there. Councillor Millward talked about not having to use your car. And that's a great advantage. I've often looked at the waterfront housing facilities that we've got there and wondered at first why people would want to go and live there. To me, it seems like the worst hell that there would ever be. But actually, it supplies a great need. And I know a few people who live there, and they just say, why would I need a car? Everything I need is on my doorstep. If I want to go out in the country, it's worth me hiring a car for the day because my costs are so minimal in terms of transport. Yeah. But the other aspect then, when I talk about that and Matt's comments, is a few years ago, and over 2 or 3 periods in those years, we had people come from Regeneration to Cradley. We had a massive presentation done to the people of Cradley. It was very well attended. It spread over a couple of days or even longer. We had plans put to us for the regeneration of Cradley, and they've disappeared. And now we've got the eyesore of the 3 or 4 shop frontages, which we've now, I think, been discussing or trying to move forward probably for about 5 years. I might be wrong, but it's been a long time. And yet we're no further forward with that. In fact, one of the properties at the end of the row there, which I believe is owned by ourselves, the old Chinese takeaway there, that's getting in as bad a state as all of the others. And I just worry that we're talking about this grand redevelopment, aren't we, in Briley Hill, which I fully support, but much smaller amounts of money in some of our smaller town centres would probably provide a much greater change for the communities that we've got there. And I think that we need to not just look at the grand schemes, but look at these smaller schemes and see where we can get the funding, because I know it's hard to get hold of, but where we can get the funding to do that. Because why should 3 separate buildings in Cradley destroy that town centre? And everybody knows about it. Probably everybody, or almost everybody around this table here, will have had their hand in that at some stage or another. So I'd just be interested to see how we could develop the scrutiny on this. It would be interesting to see what Place have done on that at some stage, whether this is pertinent to go back to Place or whether we as a committee would like to take this forward. And how do we get more information for us to more deeply scrutinise the issue? Thank you, Chair.
Did you want to come back on that, Paul?
I mean, just to say, I mean, obviously, in terms of the request for the report, that the request came around sort of an update in terms of vacancy rates. Hence, that's been the focus of the report. But I note the comments from Councillor Crompton in terms of greater detail and certainly in terms of wider intelligence of our the business uses within our sort of town centres and local centres. That's something that I'll be happy to look at.
Right, thank you. Okay, Councillor Roberts, you've been patient.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, Paul. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to Paul and his team for the work they've put into this. The first point I'd like to make really just sort of follows on from Councillor Sahota. Obviously, yes, I can go on the link and I can look at the work that's done into some of the centres that aren't listed here in the paper document, Shell Corner and my ward being one. But I do feel it probably would be better if more of those outer town centres would be better if they was to be mentioned in the report itself. As I'm sure you are aware, myself and Councillor Sahota have had quite a battle on our hands of trying to get some funding for our centre. Our car park, something that we've all the ward councils agreed on would be fantastic and would be very helpful. And I just can't help but feel the fact of that due to these centres not being mentioned in the report, is that sort of the reason why we're struggling to get extra funding? Are they? I appreciate they probably aren't going to be prioritised as much as House Owen Town or Dudley Town, but they are still very important to our borough. The second point I would just like to mention actually relates to the bids. I talk quite regularly with the House Owen bid. Are the council or how much work does the council do with the bids to try and ensure that the amount of vacant shops in our centres is decreasing? The House Own bid had quite a problem on their hands a couple of months ago, and that was actually in regards to collecting the bid payments, and they were quite worried about it, and I wasn't aware of it till afterwards. And I just sort of feel that the bid are such an important part of our plan of ensuring that our town centres do sort of move forward. Are we always giving them the support that they need? Thank you.
Okay, Paul.
I mean, in terms of the House Owen bid, Councillor Roberts, we've done a huge amount of work with them, and again, Ian may wish to come in, but we've supported the bid in terms of effectively forward funding some of that bid levy where they were struggling to get payments in. And a lot of work with Eve and Vicky Roberts and the board to support them during this period of time, and we meet with them on a regular basis, and I think they'd be the first to say that the council has supported them incredibly well during the current period of time, and we'll continue to look at how we can support them moving forward.
Just coming on the bid payments, was the council slow at collecting the payments, or was it just that the shoppers were trying to drag their feet in paying them, or don't you know? I can.
I mean, again, Ian may wish to come in. I think it was a combination. I don't think it was necessarily the council's slowness in terms of collecting the levy. I think it was more of the circumstances that all businesses find themselves in at the minute and the inability to make payments given the current situation.
Sorry, I'm really struggling to hear, but if I caught that correctly, I think one of the issues with the bid is a lot of the businesses that are required to pay the bid levy actually get 100% business rate relief this year. So a lot of the difficulty has been actually getting the businesses to understand that although you're being relieved from your business rate, you're not relieved from your bid levy. But we've been making every effort to pay, and that has caught up significantly towards the end of the year. And we also did pay in advance at the beginning of the year, so we didn't make the bid stand that cash flow problem. The council stood the cash flow problem.
Right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And Councillor Barnett.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I was reminded by Tim actually. We were a little bit curious as to how this particular item ended up with OSMB, but here it is, and it's an interesting item. I've also been reminded this discussion of the future of and discussion about more residential and essentially creating communities in high streets, so that there is the footfall is there to support the businesses are there to support the residents. And Anne has mentioned several times about people working at home. And I've talked to Matt Williams about this. It's a bit of a bee I have in my bonnet. Working from home, I appreciate it's probably quite a new thing for a lot of people this year. I've been doing it since about 1997, so it's not particularly new for me. And what does happen though, and I'll always say this, I apologise if I've said it to someone before, but talking to the dog is great while you're working from home. When the dog starts talking back, then you know that it's time that you need to get out and find some people. While that's really just a joke, obviously, it can be quite isolating, and I do wonder what we can do during if we're going to regenerate high streets, have more people living in them, maybe working from home, but actually providing co-working spaces as part of the regeneration. So there is a hub, whether it's a library or it's what was a retail space where people can go and work. Not at the moment, obviously, unfortunately, but people can turn up. They can pick a desk. They've got the internet. Maybe there's a cafe. They can get on with working. So actually, it doesn't matter who they're working for. Their co-workers are the people that sit around them. Maybe it's their neighbours. So there's more community through work as well. Just a comment I wanted to make. I don't know if Paul's got anything to add on that regarding regeneration. Thanks, Chair.
I think just to say, Chair, there's a lot of innovative work being done by sort of residential developers now in terms of how they can look at integrating sort of cohabitation and work-life balance within developments, but also around, I think as Councillor Barnett said, around creating that community and public realm space as part of any development. So I think we'd encourage that as part of our sort of design elements when we're looking at applications. It's something that we'd certainly be looking to support. And I take on board the point, it might be that we start to look at how we could potentially use some of our council-owned properties for those sort of touchdown type incubation type facilities for some businesses as well.
Yeah, that's really kind of what I'm driving at, is that maybe a hand in that, at least to get something started, if not have to run it, because the co-working spaces I've used, they can be quite difficult in big city centres. It's no problem, and people run them as a commercial operation sometimes, and it works. in smaller centres, obviously, you know, it's the co-working company, if you like, they can't, what they can't afford is the venue, and it makes it not work. So it certainly would help, definitely, if the council are involved in some way. Anyway, thank you.
Okay.
And Councillor Sahota.
I just want to make a final comment. Obviously, I think I started this discussion, obviously going back 20, 30 minutes. I think I just want to sort of echo what Joe Roberts has said, my colleague from Hellzone North. We have been able to highlight to planning and regeneration the actual neglect of Shelcorn in terms of a local centre that's been neglected for a number of years. It's part of a regeneration corridor. It needs investment. It ticks all the boxes. And hopefully, I think working with Paul and the rest of the council, we are beginning to address some of the shortcomings for the centre. And in a sense, investment in the centre will be, you know, if we're going to achieve the Vision 2030, then we also need to invest in the local neighbourhoods, not just strategic centres and district centres, but, you know, in the local centres where investment is needed. So hopefully, I think we can go forward to sort of address the shortcomings that the Shelcorn has had for the last sort of 20, 30 years. Thank you.
And I think that does that report. I don't think anybody else wants to speak on it. So we're on to item 7, which is the future designation of overview and scrutiny committees. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I will briefly introduce the report. Hopefully, if Ian's IT's okay, it'll be a double act, and he'll come in on the finance side of it. But I'm sure the report looks a bit familiar because it was issued earlier on this year, and we were due to consider it at the cancelled Overview and Scrutiny Management Board on the 26th of March, which is for obvious reasons. Following that, the government then issued regulations allowing us to cancel the annual meeting and to cancel the elections and to therefore keep all the structures in place as they are for this municipal year. So bring the report back tonight for you to consider. Doesn't need a final decision tonight. Whatever comments come out of tonight, we can build into the annual review of the Constitution, which will go to Council, Cabinet and Council in the new year. But the proposal in the report in terms of the structure of scrutiny committees is set out in paragraph 10 of your papers, and that asks to establish 4 scrutiny committees in 21-22 municipal year, those being Future Council, Health and Adult Social Care, Children and Young People, and Housing and Public Realm. So subject to any comments from tonight, we will build in any comments, recommendations into the report that's going to go to the Cabinet in the new in the new calendar year in advance of the annual council meeting in May. I think that's all I want to say really on the structure. Hopefully the report's pretty self-explanatory. So if Ian wants to come in on paragraphs 15 onwards relating to budget scrutiny. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yep, Ian, if you want to do your bit.
Sorry, yeah, there's not really a lot to add. The proposals here, I mean, we outlined what the historical process has been for every year up to the prior to the current financial year. Circumstances are obviously very different in the current financial year. This essentially proposes that in the context of what Steve has said earlier, that if the Overview Scrutiny Management Board no longer exists in its current form, then the role of overall scrutiny of the budget could move to, for example, the Future Council Scrutiny Committee, and suggest that process could start earlier in the year and be more involved than it has historically been. So whereas normally budget scrutiny all happens in November, suggests that could actually start in June. That would still, to be absolutely clear, not preclude or replace the individual service scrutiny committees looking at elements of the budget that concern them specifically in November, nor would it preclude those committees asking for further details and further working groups where they want to focus in on anything specific, as has happened in previous years when particular budget proposals have been particularly controversial or grasped the interest of the scrutiny committee.
Right, thank you. Councillor Barnett.
Thank you, Chair. What I want to discuss is item 11, and it's really the abolition of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. Well, should I say items 11 to 14. I've discussed this at length with my colleagues, and you probably, well, some of you won't be surprised to know, because when I first joined this committee in, where are we, in 2019 as Vice Chair, my first question was, why does it exist and should we really be doing it? Does it provide a benefit to the residents of Dudley Borough? And I think the answer is really that it maybe doesn't provide enough benefits. And so personally, I support the abolition of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. However, I always felt that part of its role was to help improve scrutiny across the board, and this is certainly, what paragraph 14 is talking about, that there is a recognised need to strengthen scrutiny throughout the council work. I understand that in time gone by, there was a situation where the vice chairs and chairs of all of the other scrutiny committees, outside of those committee dates, they also got together for other meetings in which they made sure they weren't crossing over and working on the same things. They discussed the work that they were, that they wanted to highlight to other vice chairs and chairs, and also talked about how they might improve scrutiny across the board. And on the back of the comment in the paragraph 14, I'd really like to see something like that happen again, and for the council to really go forward and find a way to improve scrutiny in order that the residents of Dudley Borough get better value out of their council and get better scrutiny where it's needed to be applied, and certainly by not having the cost of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board, maybe those monies might be spent on improving scrutiny elsewhere. I'm sure other colleagues have more to say on that as well, so I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Chair.
Right, thank you. So far, only Councillor Millwood, if you want to make your comments.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I came back on the council in 2015 after a 4-year break to find this committee had been set up, and really could not understand at all why it was in existence. I fail to see how myself as a scrutiny chair sits on an overview and scrutiny board that looks at the work that I am doing in another place. I really thought it was a waste of time, a waste of money. I've made my feelings known most emphatically, but I do take Councillor Barnett's comments on board, because this has been another bee in my bonnet for many years. Scrutiny training is woefully inadequate in our authority. When I became the Cabinet Member for Children's and then the Chair of Scrutiny, we organised training with the LGA, and I think it's the CPFS, I can't remember the the Order of the Words, public forum, policy forum, who came in, and we did training with our members on children's scrutiny. You know, we'd had a bad Ofsted. We needed to ensure that members know exactly what they're doing when they come to scrutiny. And it's about drilling down, it's asking the questions. But if you, as a new member, or even an older member who doesn't fully understand scrutiny, you're not in a position to drill down and ask those questions. Myself, as an experienced councillor, went to all of the training, as so did Sue Ridney and Melvin Mottram. The three of us really didn't need to be there, but the ones that did need to be there didn't come. And I really, really think that we have got an issue with our authority in member training and member development. And I will continue to bang on this drum until I see some improvements. And it is a very serious role that we undertake. And I would like to see a very detailed work programme to, you know, make sure that councillors understand, whether they're new or not, refresher courses, exactly what we are here to do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Let's have a look. Ooh, Councillor Tyler.
Thanks, Chair. I don't know if my sound is any better now.
You're breaking up, Dave.
Councillor Tyler,
I chaired the OSMB in 2015, and we did have these additional
Nope, I think we've
lost.
in there, Chair. All right, so I'll leave it with.
Yeah, I was going to say. I mean, if you want to put you want to put some comments in the chat. You know, obviously, if there's anything that you know, you can summarise that you want the officer to answer here and now. You can use use the chat function. I don't think we've got anybody else with their hands up at the moment.
Councillor Crompton.
Oh, Councillor Crompton is, or has he dropped off my list somewhere? Yeah, yeah. Okay, Councillor Crompton, go ahead. Yep.
Thank you, Chair. And actually, Dave could actually ring in on his mobile or on his house phone, using the other phone number that we got, if that's helpful for him, if he wants to try that, because I've had to do that on a few Teams calls before. I really wanted to carry on from where Councillor Bonnet and Councillor Millwood have just been talking to this. I was chair of this board for a year or 2 years, I can't remember now. And one of the things which happened with me was I was offered mentoring through the LGA. As part of that mentoring, it was a woman from Rotherham, a councillor from Rotherham, who'd obviously been through the mill in terms of the problems that they'd faced. Yeah. And one of the things that she offered to this committee, actually, which we wanted to take on board, was for us to go up to Rotherham, where they have day-long overview and scrutiny type meetings. And she felt it would be useful for us because she actually came and saw one of the meetings down here as well. Thought it would be useful for us to look at a slightly different way of scrutinising things. For me, I think the problem has been that this committee's never really been told what it should do, and I know that's the wrong way to put it, because we should work it out for ourselves. But sometimes it's easy, isn't it? You've got Children's Scrutiny Committee, you're looking after children, and so on. This overview board really, I think, has lost its way. So to replace it with something else, and I think what Chris Barnett suggested isn't a bad idea at all. We did do it before. I do remember it. I think I was a chair or a vice chair at the time, and we had a couple of meetings which were really useful. But I think if we're going to have something like that, we need more than an ad hoc situation. Now, as chairs and vice chairs, we get allowances each year, which I've always thought, when I looked at the work of cabinet members and what they got as allowances, I thought, my God, this is easy money compared to them. and I still probably believe that as well. But one of the things that I think, if we do get rid of the overview board and we take on board what Chris has said and set up a chairs and vice chairs committee structure or a way to meet together, then I don't see why that shouldn't be formalised within the Constitution. And by formalising it in the Constitution, we would believe we have a yellow book that is set up for it, not just some sort of place where we get together and talk about matters. We have a yellow book system for it. What I do believe, though, and I think what Chris and others on our side of the fence have talked about, is not to have an allowance. And what we could do is look at rotating the chairing of that committee. I think it would be very useful. But I would also say that absolutely going on Millwood as
You're losing you, Tim.
You're buffering.
Yeah.
You froze, Tim.
Yeah, it's okay, is it? Right. So what I would suggest is that as part, if we do go for that, as part of the remit of it, a working party within that should be set up. Because after all, if you're a chair or a vice chair of these committees, you're normally a bit long in the tooth. And you've got, I think as Councillor Millwood said, you've got some experience. And if we could set up a small working party within that, a structured one, to look at how we train ourselves in scrutiny. And for instance, use that working party to go out to other councils and look at what they're doing. I mean, I had a quick look through our neighbouring councils. In Sandwell, they've got 7 committees, you know. They've had bad officers on children's services going up their arm, haven't they? You know, Wolverhampton has 6 meetings. Rotherham actually only has 4 scrutiny committees, but works in a different way. So if we're going to concerned about is into our scrutiny committee so far this year. Now, I know COVID's causing a problem.
Oh, I think we're losing you again, Tim.
How many comments?
Chair, I can only see.
Tim,
can I see the top of the top of Councillor Crompton's head?
I don't know whether that's the way he's got his laptop angled.
Tim, turn your video off. We'll be able to hear you better.
Yeah, I was going to say, because that uses up a lot of feed broadband, doesn't it? Bandwidth rather.
So, sorry, Chair, I'll shut up because the network's rubbish, isn't it, tonight? And I've been on Teams all day within work, and I've had no problems at all. So I don't know what it is with this one tonight. I'll shut up now. What I'll do is put some written comments in, if you don't mind.
Yeah, stick them in the chat if you can type them in. Yeah, no problem.
Is that okay?
Or email them to the officer on the side. Yeah. Okay then. Yeah, Matt Williams, did you want to comment on anything that's been said?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And just very quickly, I think what you've got here is a great opportunity in future council. Before lockdown, officers were looking at a number of things that we need to develop as part of future council, but lockdown helped focus our minds, for want of a better expression, and we quickly began to realise that the foundation for all things future was really around technology, which is changing and really helped us out through the lockdown period. We've got the workforce, which we again completely flexible and changing in terms of how it's adapted to COVID, and our facilities as well, how we use our facilities. So again, you've got 3 things there that really provide focus in terms of subject matter for your future council committee. So technology, workforce, and facilities. There's an awful lot to scrutinise there, but it'll all be fundamental to the success of this local authority moving forward. So a great opportunity as far as I'm concerned.
Right, thank you. Councillor Millwood, I think, was next.
Yeah, something I forgot to mention earlier on, Chair. which came to me, that don't forget there are a lot of our scrutiny committees have working groups as well. So it's not just about the scrutiny committee per se, but about how we take certain aspects of our scrutiny calendar, and we drill down and look at very pertinent areas. So, you know, we're not just holding like 5-6 meetings a year. We in Children's Services hold a lot more meetings than that. So that needs to be taken on. But as Matt Williams has just said about the wonderful opportunities, I will ask that training goes in there as well, please. Thanks.
No problem. There was somebody else I saw somewhere. If you can see their hand, Manjit.
Councillor Barnett.
Councillor Barnett again, yep.
Indeed, me again. Sorry, Chair. Just to point out, Dave Tyler's, Councillor Tyler's put a comment in the feed there. He wants to suggest that if we do hold chair and vice chair meetings, it should be a requirement in the constitution for them to attend. That is all. Thank you, Chair.
Did you want to summarise anything that's been said, Steve? Anything you want to take back from that?
Thank you, Chair. I think I can be very brief in my answer, which is I do remember having the meetings of chairs and vice chairs of scrutiny committees, which were informal. I think to reinstate that meeting, but to put something in the constitution to make it a bit, let's say it's not a formal constituted committee, but it's recognised in the constitution. Hopefully that will address Councillor Tyler's point and facilitate those meetings. The point about member training and development that have been made by Councillor Millward, absolutely well made points and entirely valid points, and we will hopefully be coming back to you shortly with some developments on that. So yeah, just to say thanks very much for the comments, and we will write those into the annual review of the Constitution report that will be with you early in the new year. Thank you, Chair.
Right, no problem. Thank you. Right, I think that concludes business, apart from any questions under the usual procedure. If there are any, Manjit.
Sorry, Chair, we have another item, agenda item number 8.
Have I missed? You're right. Feedback from scrutiny
feedback,
committee,
yeah.
most important one of the lot. Yeah, my apologies. Right, yeah. Okay then. Yep. So which one's batting first?
So this is the feedback on the normal standing scrutiny committees, and it's self-explanatory, and if any chairs and vice chairs of the scrutiny committees have anything further to add verbally.
Yep. Okay, if you want to speak now, anybody want to put their hands up? Yeah, Councillor Tyler.
Chair, I'm really struggling with sound here, so would it be okay if I ask Steve Waltho to step in for me, because he's been at all our meetings?
Yeah, by all means, yeah.
Hello, Chair.
Yep, okay, Councillor Waltho, if you want to go ahead.
I'm here. One additional point. I know we've gone off the last point, and I've been struggling to hear what people have been tonight as well, so I've kept quite ready. If I may be allowed to add something that I didn't hear from the last point, and perhaps Steve could incorporate, and that is the consideration of probably a dedicated scrutiny officer. I didn't hear anybody mention that. They would then link with what Anne was talking about. The training would flow more easily. They'd be more au fait with what was required in the scrutiny arena as well. Some councils have got them, so maybe that's a consideration. On the feedback on the overview, on the Health and Social Care Committee, all I can say is that a huge amount of praise must be given to Councillor Tyler. This wasn't pre-planned, I can assure you. That's not why Dave's not speaking on this tonight. But a huge amount of praise should be given to Dave Tyler for driving the scrutiny forward. It's the best piece of scrutiny. And I'm a fairly practical bloke, as many people No, I like to see outcomes of things and problems solved. And this is the best piece of scrutiny that has ever been undertaken on this council. It was hugely thorough, managed to engage people from across the spectrum, not only within our own borough, the health and social care arena, but also the wider arena as well, across the West Midlands Authority area, really it covered, including all agencies. I've already mentioned in the service, the CCG, all were involved at all points, and I think everyone in the end agreed that it was a superb piece of work, I have to say. It covered several meetings across 2 or 3 months, and the outcome will be quite sizable. Well, I think, if I remember rightly, Councillor Tyler mentioned it was over 450 pages of evidence and reports were given. This will come back to full council for ratification next week. The final report, it's in no way that many pages, but just to comment that it really was the best piece of scrutiny work that I've ever seen on this council. And I think there were 40 odd recommendations, if I remember rightly, which is quite substantial, analysing the pandemic and our response to it. I think that's probably enough that I need to say, Chair, really.
All right, thank you. Yes, it was certainly comprehensive. We can't say it wasn't thorough. Councillor Sahota.
Good morning, Chair. I just want to sort of make an observation, really, as a member of the Place Scrutiny Committee, and raise concerns. Obviously, we had the committee meeting last week on the 19th, and we added one agenda item. And I feel, and I think other people feel, that was a missed opportunity, really, to see, for us to get a detailed update on how the Place Directorate have responded to the situation with the pandemic, and how we've been able to sort of still deliver services to our residents, what issues we've had with staffing and how we've overcome them, what lessons have we learned going forward. So I'm really puzzled why, you know, that opportunity was missed by officers or other or cabinet members to sort of really outline to that committee on how Place had delivered the service and what issues and how we can learn going forward. So to have a meeting with one agenda item, I think it didn't seem right. Thank you.
I suppose the only thing I would say is that now we've got Teams, you know, we can do that with relatively little inconvenience to members and officers. But yeah, I'll take your points. Right. So I take it. Anybody else got anything they wish to say on what's been said or the reports we've seen? Nope.
No,
Okay.
no.
Okay, then we'll go for the famous agenda item. If there are any questions, Manjit?
None, Chair.
Right. Okay, then. So that concludes the meeting. So thank you, members, for your contributions, and officers too for enlightening us. So thank you very much, and have fun with what's left of the evening.
Thank you, Ray.
Right. Okay, then. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
Mr. Chairman.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye now.